Back at it again. It's the Football Playbook with your boy RIC and the place to be. We're dealing over here on the Football Playbook, our 75th edition on the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. Click subscribe, get all of our show notification alerts, smash that like button. We're getting it in. It's a can't stop, won't stop situation. We're just getting started, counting you down to the sports take at 12 o'clock Eastern time here. Woo, double chin strap affair. And man, we got a Football Friday cameo. I had so much fun chopping it up and breaking it down with Mike Gill of the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. We had to have him back because he is, of course, the Sportscaster of the Year nominee. Already won the award once. We're going to win that award again. Good morning, Mike. How are we doing today?
What's up, Rick? Yes, we are pushing hard to try to win for a second time.
Yeah, man. The people's champion, Mike Gill, right here, right now. And I felt a little bad about bringing you on the show today because you said it was your day off. I'm like, man, I'm making the guy come on and work on his day off. But I know the chat room's happy.
Well, I'm on vacation for most of the rest of the year. So these little cameos give me a chance to at least, dip my toe in the water and give a couple thoughts for the people. I'm a man of the people, Rick.
Is that right? You're on vacation I guess when you're the broadcaster of the year, you get that kind of paid vacation, huh?
I am off today, and then I'm working Monday. I'm off Tuesday, Wednesday, and then I'm on Thursday, Friday, and then I'm off the rest of the year after that.
I need the Mike Gill schedule in my life. And of course, I know Mondays you're down at the Ocean Casino Resorts, I believe, 2 to 6, right?
Yep, that's why I'm working, man. I can't miss a day at the Ocean, so I'll be there Monday. And, we're going to chop it up after Eagles-Bears. The one day I won't be on is the Monday after Eagles-Dallas, which I'm a little sad about, but it is what it is, man.
You'll be celebrating. Don't worry about it. You'll have the eggnog flowing. You'll be popping it up, chopping it up. By the way, how's the Mike Gill Christmas experience going? We're like 9 days away. Are we complete?
I used to be so I would basically be a Christmas Eve guy. Like I would go out and scout stuff, and then on Christmas Eve I'd go back to all the spots and swoop them all up. I'm doing a little bit more online now. I've done a couple days out because I was off on Tuesday and Wednesday this week. I'm hoping to finish up tomorrow.
Oh, okay,
get it done.
That'd be sweet. Yeah, I was notoriously known to be a Christmas Eve Christmas shopper. You get a lot of discounts and bargains, right? But this year my daughter's put me on the spot with this Paw Patrol lookout tower, man. I'm like, what if I wait last second and Toys R Us sells out? Then I can't order it online because it's going to be like a day or two late. So I better buckle up and get it.
I know my girlfriend and I are like teetering around what's the date that's too late to get it here in time, or that if they say they're going to get it here Christmas Eve, but something happens. So at this point, is today the day you actually have to go out and buy it instead of order it online? Is this like the cutoff?
Yeah, I think I'll be making a trip over to Lakewood. They got a Toys R Us over there. I got to get it in this weekend. And the Eagles are going to get it in, I believe, out in Chicago, the Windy City Showdown. Let's talk about it. Let's be about it here on the Football Playbook. Mike, strap them up, lace them up. Of course, the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN Radio. Mike Gill in the building, online at least. So, to me, the Bears have very little talent. Their offensive line is like a turnstile. They're allowing a lot of sacks. Justin Fields is kind of running around, scrambling for his life. A lot of injuries. Darnell Mooney's out. Eddie Jackson's out. You look on the defensive side, not a whole heck of a lot going on there either. Is this just a second half B squad romper room here on this Sunday?
Well, defensively, Chicago was probably the worst team in the league. I mean, period, point blank. They can't stop anything. Their secondary's got some talent, but they're young. They don't rush the passer a lick. They're the worst team in football when it comes to that. Obviously, they made a couple trades that depleted that area. Defensively, they're horrible. So, yeah, I mean, you could theoretically pick your poison. You can run the ball all day on this team if you feel like it. You can take shots down the field and beat them that way. You should be able. Now, it's going to be cold out there, a little windy in the Windy City. So we'll see if they want to go to the run game, which could, stretch this game out a little bit. But, yeah, defensively, they're horrendous. They don't have a lot of weapons, a lot like the Giants. They just don't have a downfield weapon. They don't run the ball particularly well like the Giants do, and the Eagles handled the Giants' run. They handled the Tennessee's run. I think we all got a little worried after what Washington did. Well, they've kind of squashed the run game. Green Bay ran the ball on them a little bit, but the one guy is Fields. I mean, Fields closing in on 1,000 yards rushing. He could get that in the game on Sunday. He would be the one concern. If he's running around and making plays happen and just kind of keeping them around, that would be the only way I think this game, I don't say hangs in the balance, but keeps the Bears thinking they have a shot, but they just can't get a stop. I don't think they'll get a stop on. You might not see. I know the Eagles signed a new punter. You might not meet him this week.
Yeah. No, I know. We talked about that. Maybe they got to have a punter on the active man roster, I guess, but they won't necessarily need him. I will say I'll give the Bears a little bit extra glimmer of hope with this Cole Kmet. He's a big-bodied red zone mismatch. You know, you got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson still out. Reed Blankenship's going to miss some time. Who's going to start at safety? Maybe the Bears look to exploit that matchup, but I don't think it matters much unless you get down to the red zone because Cole Kmet really isn't, breaking off big chunks of yardage. He's just more of a possession type kind of receiver, tight end.
Yeah, and we talk about the tight ends a lot during the course of the year. The Eagles have in their past have had problems with the tight end. They really haven't had problems with the tight end this year. Kaiser White and TJ Edwards has gotten so much better in coverage. I mean, that is where he has been able to stay on the field and be a 3-down backer, is that he in coverage is just outstanding. And White is an athletic guy. So they have two really good linebackers in coverage. So the tight end, I mean, name a tight end that's really hurt them this year. I mean, in the past years, it was almost weekly that the tight end was getting you. That has kind of been the one area that I think last week we talked about was Daniel Jones. Could he make something happen with his feet? He got minimal yardage on the ground, and that goes back to the Houston game where Tannehill had a lot of yards rushing, and they were just a couple broken down plays where he took off. It was like 2 or 3 plays, and then of course because as Eagles fans out there are looking for so much to kind of, well, there's got to be something wrong with this team, right? Well, the quarterback gets a lot of yards. That was one game, so yes, I think Fields can get his yards. But I'm not all that concerned about the tight end. Kmet's a guy that I actually had high expectations for him. I think he's kind of disappointed to some extent this year, and it could be a product of they don't really have a lot of other things in that offense. I really liked him back in August. I thought he was going to be a big-time receiving tight end for them, and he has not turned into that. The run game, you lose in Montgomery, and, I mean, they just have nothing in the run game. This team, look, they had a little spurt. When Fields kind of was playing well and they were running the ball, they had a little spurt going. But I think the injuries and the trades and everything, this team is just – they're a different team at home. I'll give them that. They're a little bit better at home. But last week, Rick, we saw the NFL, you don't see talent disparity on television all that much. Teams scheme up ways to kind of close the gap there. Last week – the Eagles and the Giants, you clearly saw deficient talent on one side of the ball against a team that was clearly more talented. By the way, you didn't see that in the Dallas-Houston game, but you saw it in the Philadelphia Giants game. I think you're going to see that again in the game this week. The Eagles' talent disparity over the Bears is just too great for the Bears to overcome with one guy running around trying to make plays by himself.
No, I'm telling you, we've been seeing 40 burgers the last 3 weeks. We might see a 50 burger this week.
They're averaging 41 points a game the last 3 games without Goedert. What's going to happen? Now, I'm not going to sit here and suggest you're just going to start scoring 40 points a game because Goedert's back, but we kept kind of, as this season was matriculating, they were having big second quarters, and then they were kind of not scoring. Once they all kind of get together, that really hasn't happened yet, where the whole offense is clicking at the same time. We're running, we're throwing. Brown's a part of it. Smith's a part of it. Goddard's a part of it. Sanders is a part of it. We haven't seen a game or a stretch where everybody's healthy and all rolling at the same time.
No, I would agree. And I think, this is a week where you might start to see some of that Dallas Goedert back into the fold. And I don't know, Mike. I thought it was Goedert missing time was almost a blessing in disguise because you saw no tight end sets. You saw empty backfields. You saw Quez Watkins and Zach Pascal get involved a little bit more. You saw Grant Calcaterra was capable both as a pass catcher and a blocker. And you saw Jack Stoll, he's not a world beater out there, but he's not as a notorious blocker. He ain't going to get you hurt in the passing game either. He only had 3 catches all season. Goedert goes down, and he's had about 7 or 8 catches over the last month or so. To me, I feel like Shane Steichen kind of diversified the offense with Goedert being out.
Yeah.
And now it's almost like a more potent Eagles offense getting ready to go into the playoffs.
Well, what they've used the tight end is in a more traditional manner where they've used him to block and then they've used him to just kind of sit. He'll sit at the sticks and they catch that pass right and they go right down. The difference with Goedert is he'll catch that pass, reverse spin out, and get himself some yards up the field. He's great with the yak. The other guys, they're just catching the ball and literally going down. So the tight end is a more traditional use in the offense where they have now been able to get Watkins a little bit more involved. I think it's interesting. Remember the game against the Colts? We were like, and this is I think there's been a lot of talk about Hurts this week and his MVP candidacy and why, and is he the part, and then all the Parsons nonsense. You lose a weapon like Dallas Goedert. I mean, he's one of the top 3 to 5 receiving tight ends in football. And Hurts sneezed at it like he wasn't. I mean, the first game, they had a rough going. And then after that, okay, you take away Goedert, I'll figure out another way to get you. That, to me, is another example of why Hurts has evolved so much. Here's a guy who had 53 targets, 14 yards or 13 and a half yards to catch, something like that. You took that out of their offense, and they scored 40 points a game over the last 3 games. What does that say about where this offense is?
It says, you know what? We can slice and dice you which way you want. And this Sunday will be a perfect example. You want the pass? We got you. You want the run? We got you. Like Dion, I'm coming.
Unlike Dion, this team could cover and tackle. They could pass and run. Dion was great, but he couldn't tackle a lick. This team can do both things on offense. If you want,
let's talk about the tackling though, because that came up in Jonathan Gannon's presser again this week, and he said, "I like to think we improved in tackling." Didn't sound the most confident about the improved tackling on the defense, but as we know, the Chicago Bears have the number 1 run defense. That week before they signed Linville Joseph and Ndamukong Suh and Fletcher Cox was playing like 70, 80 snaps, we were saying, hey, the run defense, it's a little bit of a concern here. Well, they went out, they brought in some reinforcements, some heavy artillery, should we call them, and then they just start chopping down Jonathan Taylor's last year leading rusher, King Henry, Saquon Barkley, and now this week with the Bears, the number 1 run offense in the NFL. This defensive line rotation, we're calling them the sack pack, like the rat pack.
Yeah.
The sack pack. I don't know. We're down at the Ocean Casino, living it up, a little Atlantic City. I guess we got to figure out who's playing Dean, who's playing Frankie, But what do you make of this situation here? And I saw Linville and Suh, they actually have some performance clause bonuses if they play 30% of the snaps and win playoff games. And to me, I think it's safe to say they kind of shored up all the run defense concerns, yeah?
There's no question. And that's the thing. Everybody since the Washington game, it keeps coming up on my show. Can they follow the blueprint of Washington? They could if the Eagles coaching staff was inept. They're not. John Gannon, whether people in the chat or people watching or people who see this later on, whether you like it or not, John Gannon's a pretty smart guy and he's very good coordinator. He saw what Washington did and said, you ain't doing that again to us. So if you want to follow that blueprint, that's a losing proposition. Teams that say, we're going to just try to run the ball on you, the Eagles have now, look, the Jordan Davis injury ended up being a blessing in disguise because, and by proxy, Tui Peloto got hurt as well. They had to do something. They had to go on the street and find somebody. Those 2 injuries actually ended up being a blessing because they had to go out and bring in these 2 veteran players. And Joseph has played so well. that he has essentially taken over snaps from Jordan Davis, because Davis doesn't look like he's quite ready to contribute and come back, but it's good to kind of get him slowly reincorporated. But that Washington game, people thought there was a blueprint to follow. There's a blueprint to follow if your coaching staff allows you to continue to follow that blueprint. The Eagles said, you're not following that blueprint, so figure out another way to beat us. And so far, since that game, no one else has been able to figure stuff out, because the Eagles have tweaked and done such a good job. And look, the depth they have on that defensive line, I mean, Joseph, the job that he has done since coming in, I mean, it's been unbelievable. He takes up the two blockers. He fills the gap. But Hargrave and Cox have upped their games. Brandon Graham looks like he's got the fountain of youth coming off the edge. Sweat has been outstanding, by the way. Josh Sweat has played some great football over the last couple of weeks. So, yeah, that defensive front, it's very reminiscent to what they had going in 17, where they just kept rotating fresh guys at you constantly and getting the best snaps out of them.
Yeah, I know Sue is getting some praise in the chat room. I would argue Linville Joseph has played the better of the two. I think Linville is playing himself into a contract coming back next year. Yeah. And by the way, Sweat draws the Braxton Jones assignment. We talked about being a human turnstile, man. This guy's given up 6 sacks, 24 hurries, and 33 quarterback pressures. 33, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, their line struggles. There's no question about it. I think Reddick's the guy to watch this week, too. Reddick is another guy who I think it took Gannon a couple of weeks to figure out what was the best way to use him, but I think they've kind of figured out, how to use him now. Last year we looked at Gannon. They didn't have the personnel that they wanted to run his defense. Now, some people would say, if you don't have the personnel to run your defense, do something different. They tried to tweak and do some things as the year went on to kind of, do what they had. But you remember the whole situation last year where Fletcher Cox said, they pay me to sack the quarterback. Well, Gannon was trying to use Fletcher Cox as like the Linval Joseph. That was not working. And they did not have a nose on the team last year, so he could not really run the concepts that he wanted to run. So they went out and got Jordan Davis. Now they have Joseph. But I think the key to this Gannon defense has been not only having that nose, but James Bradbury is significantly better than Steve Nelson. Steve Nelson, they really had to play those corners so far, Nelson off the ball, because Gannon's defense predicated on not giving up the big play. You're not going to beat us over the top. Well, they were so afraid of getting beat over the top with Nelson that they had to play him so far off the ball, and teams just picked and went after him all season long over there, and their safeties were not great last year either. So I think Gannon certainly has adjusted to having much better talent to fit his scheme, and I think you're seeing, as this thing is coming together now, it is, quite frankly, other than San Francisco, trying to think off the top of my head real fast, I don't know that there's a better overall unit in the game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, one guy I want to shine a little love on, Milton Williams, too. I thought played his best game of the season last week against the Giants. So the Eagles' defensive line is gelling. I want to go back to that Washington game, though, because you said, the Jordan Davis was injury was a blessing in disguise. In a way, Dallas Goedert injury was a blessing in disguise. Let me ask you this, Mike. Was the Quez Watkins dropped touchdown in that Washington game a blessing in disguise? Because otherwise, we would have been talking about a 13-0 Philadelphia team getting set to head into Chicago. And if they had not lost, maybe they're playing their starters against the Saints and the Giants. Maybe they're not resting their starters. Maybe there's a little bit more pressure heading in to the playoffs. Do you think it was a blessing or disguise, or would you rather have this team on the brink of undefeated history?
That's a good question, because there is this balance of, like, we be talking here, can they go undefeated? Do you even want to go undefeated? There's a whole other thing that's coming up here. Because if they won that Washington game, that drop pass really changed the dynamic. They could win this game against the Bears and essentially have the things pretty secure here. Instead, they have to beat the Bears and then beat Dallas next week. Then the question after that, if they did beat the Bears this week, which I think they will, handily, and then they beat Dallas on Christmas Eve.
Number 1 seed is clinched.
You would be the number 1 seed. The New Year's Day game against the Saints, meaningless. The Giant game on the final Sunday of the year or Saturday, that game has not been scheduled yet, meaningless. Then you would have a bye. You're talking about possibly 3 straight weeks. It's almost like a preseason where you would not play. And then you would face Dallas most likely again in the divisional round. That's a long time off with not having a lot of meaningful snaps for this team. So, if you would have won that Washington game, you could essentially have closed the deal this week, and then the Dallas game wouldn't have had a lot of meaning. So I think losing that game is helpful. You don't want to talk about – and let's listen. There's been a lot of talk about where this Eagles team already ranks in the pantheon of great Eagles teams. Now, we know in Philadelphia only one Super Bowl, so not a lot of great Eagles teams to compare to, but a lot of talented teams that came up short. If you really wanted to say this is the greatest Eagles talent roster of all time and want to put them in the pantheon of great teams of all time, then you would have been rooting for an undefeated season with the Super Bowl. I don't know that this team is on that level, so it's probably better that they got that out of the way, right?
I like to watch Mercury Morris squirm every week. I don't know. Right. I will say, for whatever it's worth, I still put the 1960 Eagles team up top. I think the 2017 team is second. But I do think if this team runs the table, I think it will be the greatest.
The 2017 team and this team have a lot of similarities. I think
because that team was scrapping and clawing. They truly were an underdog, right? They were a wild card, I think.
No, that team was the number 1 seed.
Were they the number 1? Okay.
Well, that was the year that Wentz got hurt, and they were the number 1 seed because they raced out to like an 11-3 record with Wentz. He got hurt, and they got the number 1 seed, but they were the underdogs in the playoffs because Foles was the quarterback. But they were the number 1 seed that year. But it was because – and that team had a lot of injuries. They lost Jason Peters. They lost the linebackers. That Ronald Darby – they traded for him, and then he dislocated his ankle and missed 10 weeks, so they were playing with like Jalen Watkins. They had a lot of injuries on that Super Bowl team and ended up winning, and that was the whole underdog thing. But they were the number 1 seed in the playoffs that you could remember. They had a home game against Atlanta. They barely won that game. The pass goes through Julio Jones's hands in the back of the end zone on the final throw of the game from Matt Ryan. They beat Minnesota the next week at home. They get that interception from Patrick Robinson, and the whole game shifts right there, and they crush Minnesota, and then they win the Super Bowl, obviously. The 2004 team is an interesting one to compare. You know, McNabb and Owens, that team was loaded. And obviously Owens gets hurt, and he comes back for the Super Bowl. He has a heroic game. But this team, talent-wise, I think is more comparable to the 17 team than – I haven't really thought much about the 04. It keeps – because Brandon Graham brought it up. He was on somewhere the other day. He brought it up. And then it was Darren Sproles brought it up somewhere talking about the 17 team and this team. And Graham was kind of diplomatic about it because he was on both teams. So, but keep in mind, you had a Graham that year that was 4 or 5 years younger than this Graham. You had Cox on that team that was a little younger than this version. These corners are way better. These corners are significantly better than the corners on that team. You had Malcolm playing safety on that team with Rodney McLeod. I think those safeties were better than although, you know who doesn't get mentioned at all, Rick? Marcus Epps. No, his name has not been mentioned at all season long, and he has had a really solid year.
He has played 99% of the snaps. I'll give him that. He is an Iron Man, and he's an overachiever, and he's a notorious hard worker, but he does have limitations, Mike. You know, I've seen him get beat in coverage. I've seen him with a lot of missed tackles, and quite frankly, like the back end secondary, when Chauncey and Epps are both in there, they're both a little bit timid to step up and make the tackle in the open field. That's just what I've seen. But I will say, from expectations, he has exceeded them. Absolutely.
Well, right. I mean, because in training camp, the safety position was one of the huge question marks because Epps was thought to be the best guy they had, and he was an unknown player. The safety spot really has not been – now, of course, they went out and got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson at the start right before the season started, but he had not played a lot of safety either, and he kind of solidified that group with his playmaking ability. But Epps has kind of been a solid guy. But to go back, the safeties on the 17 team were collectively better. The defensive lines were similar. The linebackers on this team are excellent. Edwards has changed the dynamic of the way. It's another part of Gannon being able to now trust his linebackers. Could not do that last year. Those guys were pitiful. I mean, quite frankly, that was a sad. Now, I know TJ Edwards was a part of that linebacker group last year. He has gotten so much better, but Kaiser White is significantly better than Alex Singleton. And we talked about on my show yesterday, and this is more, now we're 4 beers in having this conversation, right? Would the defense actually be better if Nakobe Dean was the starter? Is he look, I'm a West Virginia guy. Kaiser White, baby. I was pumped when they signed him because I thought he would really help this defense. Mm-hmm. But is Nakobe Dean would he actually be would that make the defense better if he played?
I think for next year it will be. I
think
we're
going to see because they're not going to bring both those guys back.
Correct. And I think, at this stage of his development, like you can't teach, nothing replaces in-game experience, right? Like Kaiser White, he's faced the flying bullets. Nakobe Dean, I like what I've seen. And I was on the show yesterday saying, I think it makes Kaiser White very disposable at the end of the season.
Nakobe Dean played 15 plays in that game 2 weeks ago and led the team in tackles. Think about that.
Well, I think 2 or 3 came on special teams, right?
Maybe, possibly. But I will say this. He made 2 plays back-to-back, and I said, who the hell is number 17? I hadn't seen him all year long. I said, is Alshon Jeffrey out there playing defense? Who is 17? He was decisive, quick to the football. He had his keys, read them quickly, went right to the back. I mean, look, it's all obviously, like I said, now we're 6 beers deep having this conversation. He's better. No, I just think this team has a lot of depth, which is what the 17 team had as well. Guy gets hurt, next guy comes in, and the team. So this team has the depth. This offensive line, I think, is better than the 17 team because remember, Peters went out, Vaitai went in, Wisniewski went in at guard. And he was the 3rd guard on that team. They had Sayamala there, and he was not playing well. They replaced him with Chance Warmack, and Warmack was horrible. So they finally went to Wisniewski. The rest of the line was, I think, this pretty much. You had Kelsey, you had Johnson. Oh, you had Brandon Brooks playing right guard on that team. This line is much more steady, much more congruent. They play together a lot. A.J. Brown is better than any receiver. I know Alshon was probably at his height that season, but A.J. Brown better than Alshon. Devonta Smith is clearly better than Torrey Smith, and the tight ends are kind of a wash, Goedert and Ertz. And I think this running game with Sanders is probably a more elusive back than the duo of LeGarrette Blount and Jay Ajayi.
Yeah, I think the skill position players are definitely much better. Mike, I wanted to pick your brain on a couple games before we get you out of here, but quickly, one-word answers are fine. Is it Kayvon Wallace or Anthony Harris starting at safety since you brought that up? And then a score prediction. I'm going to go 38-10, which was my score prediction for last week's game against the Giants. I know I've been saying all week long they could put up a 50-burger, but I think the starters will be out maybe by the 3rd quarter. And so I'm going to go 38-10 as my score prediction for the 2nd straight week. How do you see it? And do you like Harris or Kayvon at safety?
I would imagine they're going to start with Kayvon and just kind of give him the chance. And then, if he's struggling, then you go to the veteran break glass if necessary. Because Harris really hasn't played a game all season. He was on the practice squad with Denver. But I know he practiced yesterday and probably ready to go. Wouldn't be surprised. But Wallace played a lot of snaps last week. Not that they were good snaps, but he was at least out there. Probably some sort of rotation between those two. I don't think anybody owns the snaps in that spot unless Wallace goes out there and performs, and they're like, okay, this guy, he feels like, maybe sometimes you just need to know what your role is. When you get thrown into a role where you're just like, I don't know when I'm playing. I had 31-13. I agree. I think they kind of probably take the foot off the gas. Not take the foot off the gas, but yeah, you're right. The defense for the Bears is just so bad, and there's just too many weapons on the Eagles' offense. They can pick and choose who they want to highlight this week. So I like your score. That sounds nice. I got 31-13. I think they kick a couple field goals. Fields runs around at the end, gets a late touchdown, and on to Dallas.
On to Dallas. I can't wait. All right, so we're talking to Mike Gill, 97.3, the Sports Bash, ESPN Sportscaster of the Year nominee for the second time, by the way. Make sure you go and get your vote on if we can. So I want to pick your brain, quick hitters here, Mike, and get your opinion on some things. So the 49ers, not sure how much you saw of this game last night, 21-13. Brock Purdy with the little razzle-dazzle there last night, finding George Kittle a couple times. And
finally for Kittle, finally.
Yeah, I saw you had a little wager going on there. So 49ers have won 7 in a row. They got their T-shirts and hats last night. At Washington, Christmas Eve. At Las Vegas, New Year's Eve. Versus the Cardinals, Week 18. I think they win at least 2 games. Are they going to knock off the Vikings as the number 2 seed?
No, Minnesota's schedule's cakewalk. Minnesota probably won't lose again. I know I'm not a huge Minnesota believer, but they're not going to be tested very much. I think they play Indianapolis, Green Bay. They play Detroit in there. No, they just played Detroit last week. I know Minnesota's schedule is pretty cakewalk the rest of the way here. I don't think San Francisco. I think it's going to be Philly 1, Minnesota 2, San Francisco 3, Tampa Bay 4, Dallas will be 5, Washington will be 6, and then Detroit 7.
Well, let me ask you about Detroit because
that's a big game this week, that Detroit Jets game.
Yeah, and suddenly it was a pick 'em, and suddenly now the Jets at home are favored by 1.5. How do you see that one?
Defense, man. The Jets play really, really good defense. You just don't know what you're going to get from White. I mean, he puts up big numbers. They don't have, they just don't. The Lions defense, when they fired the defensive secondary coach, you know what they stopped doing for Eagles fans? They stopped blitzing so much. The Lions dialed back the blitz, and that helped their secondary out big time. Their secondary was a disaster, and their defense has gotten so much better. Goff has actually played really well. Jameson Williams scored a 41-yard touchdown last week. He might have been the best receiver in that draft class. He had the ACL, but he's now back. Amon-Ra St. Brown, beast mode. They run the ball pretty well. That game's very interesting. I think the Lions have more offensive firepower than the Jets do, but the Jets' defense is better. I'm not surprised the Jets are a slight favorite, but I kind of like the Lions. They've been playing them and the 49ers have played some of the best football over the last 5-6 weeks.
Yeah, they'll be the team that nobody wants to play in the playoffs if they get in.
Yes.
That's going to be one of the more fun matchups to watch this week. And I wanted to pick your brain on this Giants and Commanders game. They're going to do it again, line them up, knock them down. This one, though, the Giants are licking their wounds off of a beatdown out at the woodshed, while the Commanders had a nice week off to game plan and prepare. How do you see this one?
I've been talking about this game for a couple of weeks now because Giants lead into the Eagles. I thought that game against Philadelphia, I know the talent disparity, but they were at home knowing they had to go to Washington after they tied, and then Washington had a bye to watch them again. I think Washington blows them out. I think the Giants are out of gas. Washington saw them, tied on the road. Bad tie, by the way, but it doesn't matter. That's a win for both teams. They got to watch them again last week. They got to sit home and relax. So they prepared for them by playing them, watching them, and then getting ready for them for a third time. It's been all Giants all the time for Washington the last 3 weeks, a veteran coaching staff. I think Washington blows them out. And I say blowout, 20-3, 24-7, something like that. Because Washington, I think, is just a better football team than the Giants are at this point.
Yeah, I think the Commanders crush them. Let me ask you about Dallas. Obviously, Micah Parsons made a little bit of news this week. Jacksonville suddenly 5-8. I don't know. I mean, I liked what I saw from Trevor Lawrence. He had a career high 368 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions last week. Micah needs to take care of business. I'm putting the Cowboys on upset alert this week.
Should. Trevor Lawrence is playing some of the best quarterback in the game right now. He's been pretty good the last couple of weeks here. They're starting to look. Doug Peterson, you think there's anything Doug wants to do more than knock off the Cowboys? He still has that eagle invigoration in him, and he knows what it would mean to his buddies up in Philadelphia to knock the Cowboys off. I like Jacksonville as well. Look, Dallas to me last week, look, I'm not sitting here on high alert because they barely beat Houston, but to me, Dallas still trouble against the run. They can be beat in the pass game. Their corners take too many chances. Their corners are not very good other than Diggs, who takes a lot of chances. You can go after him. Lawrence is playing at a very high level right now. You're talking about upset alert. I agree with you because too many – look, if you talk to a reasonable Dallas fan, right, they're hard to find. But if you talk to one, they'll tell you they need corners. Their corners other than Diggs, and Diggs gets beat too many times. He takes too many chances, but they're weak on the corners. And this is a tough matchup for them. Having to go on the road, last week they were at home playing Houston and barely got out of that game. Now you got to follow that up. So this would be a huge one if Jacksonville could win for Philadelphia.
It'll be interesting, I'll tell you that. All right, last one for you, Mike. Where did I want to go with you? So, I see these snippets. Thanks for hanging out overtime, by the way. I saw these snippets of Mickey McDaniels walking around in his little capris there in the Miami practice with a T-shirt. I wish it was colder. And, I really hate everything about the guy. But I'll tell you what. You like how I said that? I'll tell you what, though. I kind of like the Dolphins here with the hook. Getting 7.5. They kind of disappointed me the last couple weeks. I think Tua is going to bounce back despite the cold weather. This does have playoff ramifications up in Buffalo. How do you see it?
I think the Dolphins are in the tailspin, man. I was a Dolphins guy earlier. I do a thing on my show called the Fine Five, Ugly Five. I had them in my Fine Five up to number 3 at one point. I love the coach, by the way, and I love the offense. And they have been figured out. They are figured out. Tua was horrendous last week. Now, that doesn't mean he's bad. He was horrendous last week. I think that team is starting to sputter a little bit. And by the way, them going to Buffalo after beating Buffalo in Miami, no way, dude. That's a team that they're going to look at that cold weather and be like, you know what? We'll save it for next week. All right. Well, that's the procrastination team. We'll put it off till next week. I think they get smoked this week, actually.
Yeah, I think Tua made me laugh, too. I think he said, it gets cold in Alabama, too.
Yeah, 78 degrees it gets cold in Alabama. Look, I like that Dolphins team, and I think they're going in the right direction. Look, they went to San Francisco and got their ass kicked. Period, point blank. They got crushed out there. And that was Brock Purdy's first game. And now I know Purdy has turned into a serviceable guy. They could not do anything against that team. Last week against the Chargers, they were hideous.
I know.
Hideous in that game. It's going to be – I think it's a tough spot for them to go to Buffalo. And by the way, this is their third straight road game, right? They were in San Francisco. Then they were at L.A., and now they got to go to Buffalo. That's a lot of traveling from Miami, dude.
No, I know. I think it's a bounce back week, but if they lose and the Jets win, like you say, look out.
Oddly enough, New England is in the playoffs right now.
Is that right? Oh, wow.
They are the 7th seed after they beat Arizona.
McDaniels, good old friend Josh McDaniels.
They beat Arizona the other night, and that put them into the 7th spot. New England, I feel like everybody would say the Jets are better. There's a lot of teams in that mix there that we all like. They're new kids on the block, and we like them all. But old school New England just hanging in there, crashing the party.
Yeah, we shall see. Last one, I guess. Question in. I don't think the chat room wants to know: would the Eagles play their starters against the Saints just to secure a better draft pick? I don't think Nick Sirianni and company are worried about that. They got business at hand. So I think it's safe to say, though, they're not going to play their starters just to secure the draft pick, right?
I don't know. I think you almost have to think about playing them for a half. You can't have them not play for 3 straight weeks, right?
Yeah, no, I agree.
So you're almost treating that like the second, I guess it would be now, because there's 3 preseason
game. Yeah.
Right, where you're playing them for a half. That's interesting, though, because if you beat the Saints, that helps your draft practice. And we've seen the Eagles in the past use games to improve their draft stock. So I wouldn't put that out of I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibilities. But part of that is they got to get some reps. You got to get the bullets flying at you. You can't have these guys sitting on the sideline for 3 straight weeks. That's a tough position to be in, where you've clinched by that time of the season. And there's so much, because keep in mind, the number 1 seed is the only team now that gets a bye.
Yeah. No, I've been echoing this all week long. It's really a month, because if you factor in Saints is a week, Giants is a week, the bye week is a week. By the time you get to that first game in the playoffs, a whole week has gone by. It's a month where you don't play.
We just saw this in baseball, not to compare the two, but the 2 teams that sat for the week, Atlanta and LA, both got beat in the playoffs because the teams were playing. There's been this balance over the years. The wild card team in football, generally, you're only sitting out 1 week because you have a bye. You're used to that. You ain't used to sitting out 3 weeks potentially, though. That's a different story.
No, it's gonna be a topic of conversation if we have you back. Hopefully next week we'll chop it up and break it down, and we'll be a week closer. It'll be Christmas week next week. Oh my God, the year is just flying by. But playoff football's around the corner. December football. Buckle up, Mike Gill. We appreciate the time, my man.
All right, everybody. I'll see you.
Any parting shot for the people? What do we got going? Your next show is what, Monday? Buckle up.
I'll be back on Monday at Ocean. I'm actually going to Ocean tonight for dinner. I'll be at Ocean tonight.
Where are we going? The Dolce?
No, American Cut.
Okay. What do they got? Steaks going on there?
Yeah, baby. It's a Friday for steaks.
No invite?
Dolce I was at a couple weeks ago. Very good.
Brother. No invite. What's up with that?
I'll be bouncing around afterwards. If you text me, you can come find me.
I'll catch you at the tables for a little action.
And then Monday, I'll be back at the gallery. I do the show live from the gallery, same spot where they do the post-game show, same exact spot. We do our show Monday, and then there's guys do the post-game show there on Sundays. So, and then I'm off Tuesday and Wednesday next week, but I'm working Thursday and Friday next week.
All right.
I couldn't take off the whole Dallas week, man.
Yeah, no, I hear you. See, Mike Gill goes to the Ocean for the steaks. Rick goes to the gallery for the steaks, right? You see what I did there? Hey, on that one, Mikey, I tried over here. We'll get you out of here. Appreciate the time. Go follow him at Mike Gill Show on the Football Playbook. We're so happy to have him. All right. There you go. Tone DeShields II holding it down behind the scenes. It's the Football Playbook Part 75 edition. Boy, we are moving and grooving. Mike went a little overtime with us there today. So grateful for that. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll see how the timing goes here. I do have some more news and notes on the Eagles-Bears. I do want to get into the NFL Week 15 pick'em. There's no bye weeks this week, so we got a little bit longer to go. Let's do this. Let's smash the like button while you're here. Click subscribe for all of our show notifications. We're 75 episodes into this great adventure. We're going to pay some bills. And when we come back, man, I got a special 3-team parlay for Richard Rosani if he's in the chat room. Buckle up. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after this.